Zanille Dlamini never told anyone her secret. Every morning in their apartment in Midrand, Johannesburg, she woke up before sunrise. She packed Sipho's lunch, cleaned the kitchen, and got herself ready for work. By the time Ma Grace, her mother-in-law, came out of her room, everything was already done. But Ma Grace never noticed. She only noticed what she believed was missing. "Useless girl," she often said loudly. "You sit in my son's house and do nothing. A woman like you should be grateful." Zanille always stayed quiet. She worked 2 jobs. In the morning, she went to her office. At night, she logged in on her laptop and worked for hours. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen. Her back hurt from sitting too long. But she never complained, because every month, from her private account, she paid the full rent. $5,800. Not Sipho. Not Ma Grace. Her. 2 years ago, Sipho had lost his job. He said it was temporary. He promised things would get better. Zanille believed him. When the rent was due, she paid it without telling anyone. Then she paid again. And again. Month after month. Ma Grace told everyone proudly, "My son is doing well. He takes care of this family." She praised Sipho in front of guests. She served him the best food. She called him a real man. And she treated Zanille like a burden. "Village girl from Thatha," she mocked. "You know nothing about city life. You are lucky my son married you." Zanille smiled politely and swallowed her pain. She remembered the nights she skipped dinner to save money. The jewelry she quietly sold. The overtime she begged for. The tears she wiped away in the bathroom so no one would hear. They slept peacefully in a house she paid for. And they never even said thank you. Zanille carried the family on her back. In silence. Zanille Dlamini's days had become a quiet battle she fought in her own home. Every morning, before the sun fully rose over Midrand, she was already on her feet. Ma Grace, her mother-in-law, never slept past 8. By the time she opened her eyes, Zanille had already cooked breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, and made the house shine as if it belonged to someone else entirely. But it never mattered. Ma Grace didn't see the effort. She only saw what she wanted, someone to blame. "Zanille, why is this place still dusty?" she would snap, even if Zanille had polished the floors that morning. "You call yourself a woman? You can't even manage a simple home." Zanille's heart sank every time. She wanted to answer, to say, "I'm the one paying this rent. I'm the one keeping your son's life together." But she didn't. She swallowed her words, smiling politely, hiding the storm inside her. She had learned long ago that words could not change Ma Grace. Silence was her shield. Family gatherings were worse. Relatives came and went, and Ma Grace took every opportunity to humiliate her. "Look at her," she said one evening in front of Sipho's cousin. "A village girl from Thatha, thinking she belongs here in Johannesburg. She knows nothing about proper life." Zanille felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her head down. She served food, refilled drinks, and laughed politely at jokes about her upbringing, even when her chest ached with humiliation. Every insult landed like a knife, but she forced herself to smile, pretending it didn't hurt. Sipho never said a word. He sat quietly, sipping his tea, pretending he didn't hear. Sometimes Zanille caught his eyes, pleading silently, but he looked away. He was afraid of his mother's wrath, afraid of confrontation. Zanille had stopped expecting help from him years ago. She cooked, cleaned, scrubbed bathrooms, polished floors, folded laundry, and kept the house spotless, all while secretly shouldering the financial burden. Every month, she quietly transferred $5,800 for rent from her account, the only person in the house who knew the truth. Even when Ma Grace demanded she wake at 6 for chores, or stand by while the guests laughed at her accent and her Mthatha manners, Zanille endured. She endured the shouting, the insults, the belittling. She endured the endless rules. "Never touch that. Don't sit there. That's not clean enough. Why are you wearing that?" Zanille learned to disappear into her work, to hide behind a polite smile, to carry her pain in silence. She learned that strength wasn't about fighting back. It was about surviving every single day while holding together the very family that treated her like nothing. And through it all, she kept paying. Quietly, relentlessly, because she knew the truth. Without her, the house wouldn't stand, and yet no one, including her husband, would ever realize. The woman who paid in silence was invisible, but her strength was the glue holding the family together. And yet no one knew. Not Ma Grace. Not Sipho. No one. That evening started like any other. Zanille had cooked dinner carefully, making sure everything was perfect. She thought a warm meal might calm Ma Grace, who had been unusually tense all day. But as soon as she put the last plate on the table, Ma Grace's eyes narrowed. "Why is this food even edible?" Ma Grace snapped, pushing her chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "Did you learn anything from your village, or is this how you spoil my son every day?" Zanille's hands froze on the table. She had been careful, patient, polite. Everything she had ever done in that house. And yet it was never enough. She opened her mouth to say something, but a look from Sipho stopped her. He was sitting quietly, staring at his plate, avoiding eye contact with both of them. Maugrace's voice rose, sharp and angry. You're living for free. Do you understand that? Free. And what are you giving us in return? Nothing. Nothing. You are ruining my son's life. Zenil blinked, stunned. She felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to explain. She wanted to scream that she had been paying the rent for 2 years, that she had carried the family, that she had given her life for this house. But the words caught in her throat. Then Maugrace did something Zenil never expected. She grabbed a pile of Zenil's neatly folded clothes and threw them across the hallway. Shirts, pants, jackets. They tumbled to the floor with a heavy thud. Pack your things, Maugrace shouted, pointing to the door. You are leaving. Tonight. Now. Zenil froze, unable to move. Saipho stayed silent, just staring at the floor. His silence felt like a betrayal heavier than the insults, heavier than the thrown clothes. She realized he would not stop this. He would not protect her. With trembling hands, Zenil grabbed a small suitcase she had packed long ago, just in case. She folded the few things she could carry, her heart aching with disbelief. She had never imagined that after all the sacrifices, after all the nights she stayed up working extra hours, after every tear she had held back, this would be the result. The relatives who were visiting had gathered at the doorway, shocked at the sudden chaos. Some whispered, some stared, but no one intervened. Maugrace was shouting, Saipho was silent, and Zenil felt a strange clarity amid the chaos. She was leaving, yes, but this was not a defeat. That night, she walked out of the apartment she had been paying for silently, dragging her suitcase behind her. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in years, she felt the cold bite of freedom. It was terrifying. It was painful. But somehow deep down she felt alive. She didn't know where she would sleep or how she would survive the night, but one thing was clear. She could no longer live under someone else's cruelty. The woman who had carried an entire household quietly was finally walking away, with nothing but a suitcase and a quiet, unshakable strength. Zenil Dlamini had never felt so small. That first night, with only her suitcase and a heavy heart, she found herself at a quiet bus station on the edge of Johannesburg. The benches were cold, the streetlights flickered, and the distant hum of traffic reminded her she was alone. She curled up under her thin jacket and tried to sleep, but every sound seemed louder, every shadow darker. She thought about the apartment she had just left. The same apartment she had paid for, month after month, for 2 long years. The apartment where she had cooked, cleaned, and held a family together, while being called useless, lazy, and a village girl. Now it felt like it had never been hers at all. By morning, the reality hit harder. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Exhaustion weighed her body down, and tears she had held back for years finally came. She let them fall freely, long, hot streams of grief and frustration, crying for the first time in a decade. She sobbed for the nights she skipped meals, for the weekends she worked double shifts just to make ends meet, for the jewelry she sold quietly to cover rent. She cried for the love and respect she had given freely, and for the cruel truth that no one in that house had ever appreciated. After the bus station, she walked slowly to Soweto, clutching her suitcase. Her friend Lerato Kumalo answered her late-night call without hesitation. The moment Zenil stepped inside Lerato's small but warm home, the weight on her shoulders lifted slightly. Lerato didn't ask questions or judge. She offered a cup of tea, a blanket, and a place to rest. Zenil sank into the sofa, exhausted and raw, letting herself be weak for the first time. Lying there, Zenil thought about her sacrifices. She had done everything for a family that didn't see her worth. She had given her strength, her money, her patience. And for what? She realized she had built their comfort while burying herself under invisible labor and silent suffering. The truth hit hard. She had loved and served people who never respected her, who never noticed her, who never thanked her. For the first time, Zenil allowed herself to feel the betrayal fully. She felt broken, yes, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny ember of clarity started to glow. She had been invisible for too long. She had been quiet for too long. And now, even in this small, humble living room in Soweto, with tears still on her cheeks, she knew one thing clearly. Things had to change. She didn't yet know how she would rise, or how she would reclaim what was rightfully hers. But she understood one undeniable truth. She had given everything to the wrong people, and now, for the first time in years, she would focus on herself. The world outside was uncertain, but for the first time, Zenil felt a flicker of freedom, and with it, the faintest spark of hope. Even as Zenil sat on Lerato's sofa, wrapped in a warm blanket, her mind drifted back to the life she had led behind the walls of that apartment. No one knew the truth. Not Maugrace, not Saipho, not a single relative who had mocked her. They all believed she was just a quiet, obedient wife, someone who did nothing but clean, cook, and smile politely. But the truth was far different. Months before the final explosion, Zenil had quietly applied for a remote finance job with a company in Nairobi, Kenya. She didn't tell anyone. She knew if Ma Grace found out she was earning money independently, the jealousy and ridicule would have been unbearable. So she kept it secret. Every morning, after preparing breakfast and seeing Sifo off to job interviews, she logged into her laptop, the screen glowing in the small corners of their apartment while Ma Grace paced, criticizing and judging. Through that Nairobi job, Zanil set up an automated payment system. Every month, on the dot, $5,800 left her account and went directly to the landlord. No one else needed to see it. No one else knew. The landlord only knew her name. To everyone else, the apartment remained Sifo's success, an investment they had supposedly made together. Ma Grace bragged endlessly to her friends and relatives. "My son is doing so well," she said. "He takes care of his family. We are blessed." Sifo nodded quietly, basking in the praise, completely unaware of the truth. Zanil smiled politely at Ma Grace, nodding along, while hiding the reality that she was the one making it all possible. She remembered nights when she stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning, juggling spreadsheets, reconciling accounts, and ensuring payments went through. She had skipped meals, sold her jewelry, and sometimes even walked to work in the rain, exhausted but determined. All of it, every sacrifice, was invisible to the very people she had been protecting. And that night, sitting in Lorado's living room, Zanil realized something that hit her harder than any insult or betrayal. She had been protecting people who did not care, people who would never see her value unless forced to. She had carried their comfort, their pride, their illusions, and they had taken it for granted. A small, cold smile formed on her lips. The secret they never knew, the job, the money, the effort, was hers. And now, she decided, it would no longer serve them. No more silent sacrifices. No more invisible labor. She had spent too many years keeping them afloat while being disrespected and humiliated. For the first time in years, Zanil felt a spark of power. She realized she had a choice. She could continue to protect them, or she could finally stop. And for the first time, she decided that she would stop. They would see what it meant when the woman who had given everything refused to give any. The secret was hers, and soon, it would be revealed in a way that no one could ignore. Zanil Dlamini sat in her small Soweto apartment, sipping tea and watching the morning sun creep through the window. She took a deep breath and opened her laptop. With a few clicks, she canceled the automatic payment she had been sending to the landlord for the past 2 years. The $5,800 that had quietly kept the Dlamini apartment in Midrand afloat would stop leaving her account from now on. She felt no guilt, no fear. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel what it meant to prioritize her own. She had carried their comfort silently for years, and now, it was time for them to face reality. It didn't take long. Within days, the landlord called Ma Grace, frustrated and firm. "Your rent is overdue," he said. "We need the payment or the apartment will be vacated." Ma Grace's voice trembled as she tried to negotiate. She had always believed the money was magically coming from investments, or her son's supposed success. Now, the illusion was shattering. Sifo looked confused and helpless. He had never managed money before, and suddenly, he had to explain to the landlord why the rent wasn't paid. He begged Ma Grace for suggestions, but she was panicked, pacing the living room, her earlier confidence gone. The relatives who used to admire them quietly shook their heads. Everyone began to whisper that something was wrong. They tried everything. Ma Grace called banks, trying for loans. She begged distant relatives for help. She even offered to sell furniture, heirlooms, anything that could cover the rent. But nothing worked. Every door they knocked on closed in their faces. The apartment, the comfort, the pride, they had all been illusions. Illusions built on someone else's hard work. Meanwhile, Zanil, far away in Soweto, felt a strange calm watching it all unfold. She had carried them through their lies and laziness, and now she was free. She had worked hard, sacrificed her sleep, meals, and peace, and she had the satisfaction of knowing the truth. The family who had humiliated her would finally see what life looked like without her. Every day that passed, Ma Grace grew more desperate. She had always demanded control, respect, and admiration, but now, she faced the terrifying reality of dependence. Sifo, who had never stood up for Zanil, began to understand just how much she had done silently, though he still didn't speak. The house, once a symbol of Sifo's success and Ma Grace's pride, started to crumble. The laughter and applause at family gatherings turned into panic and whispers. The illusion of a perfect life, the one Ma Grace had built in her mind, was breaking apart piece by piece. Zanil watched it from a distance, a quiet observer of the storm she had long predicted. For the first time in years, she didn't have to beg, explain, or protect anyone. She had stopped paying, and suddenly, the world she had silently carried was unraveling. And in that unraveling, she felt a thrill, a power that came from finally choosing herself over the people who had never seen her work. No one had expected her to stop. No one had imagined that the woman they had called useless and lazy was the very reason their lives seemed perfect. And now they were about to learn the truth. A few days after the eviction notice, Ma Grace paced the living room like a caged lion, frantically dialing numbers and muttering under her breath. Sifo hovered nearby, confused and anxious, trying to figure out what went wrong. The sense of control Ma Grace had always held was slipping through her fingers, and with every passing hour, panic consumed her. Then the doorbell rang. Ma Grace rushed to answer, hoping it was a relative with a solution, but instead, it was the landlord himself, holding a folder in his hand. "Ma Grace Dlamini?" he asked firmly. Yes, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is everything?" He held up the folder. "I need to speak to Zenil Dlamini," he said. The words hit Ma Grace like a thunderclap. She froze, staring at him. "Zenil," she whispered. "But she doesn't." The landlord ignored her confusion. "This folder has everything. Receipts, bank transfers, emails. Zenil Dlamini has been paying your rent in full for the past 2 years." Ma Grace's eyes widened as she slowly sank into the nearest chair, clutching the armrests as if they could hold her upright. The documents were proof. Every month's payment, every transaction logged, every email confirmation from the landlord. There was no mistake. The money had come from Zenil all along. Sifo's jaw dropped. His face turned pale as he flipped through the papers, trying to understand what he had been missing for 2 whole years. "But, I thought investments," he stammered. Ma Grace couldn't speak. The ground felt like it had disappeared beneath her. Every insult she had hurled at Zenil, every mocking word about her being a village girl, or useless, came crashing back. She had humiliated a woman who had quietly carried her entire household. She had never even suspected that the person she had treated with cruelty and jealousy was the one holding everything together. Her hands shook as she looked at the landlord. I don't understand," she whispered. She paid." "Yes," the landlord said. "Every cent. She even set up an automated payment through her own account. You never knew." Only Zenil knew. Ma Grace's mind raced. The pride she had felt in Sifo, the smug satisfaction of controlling Zenil, the feeling of superiority, it all vanished in an instant. The woman she had looked down on, mocked, and scorned was the one who had kept them afloat. Tears filled her eyes. Anger, shame, and disbelief collided inside her. For years, she had treated Zenil like nothing, and now the truth was laid bare. Every insult, every punishment, every humiliating comment she had made, it all came back to her, heavy and undeniable. Zenil, who had carried the house on her shoulders without anyone knowing, had finally become visible in the most undeniable way. And Ma Grace felt it, the terrifying, humbling realization that the person she had scorned was far stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever imagined. For the first time, Ma Grace understood. She had underestimated Zenil completely, and the woman who had been invisible for so long had finally proven that she was the backbone of a family that had never seen her work. A few days after the shocking revelation, Ma Grace and Sifo found themselves standing nervously outside a modest house in Soweto. Ma Grace's perfectly polished nails gripped the doorframe, but she didn't dare knock immediately. Sifo shifted from foot to foot, silent, unsure of what to say. The air between them was heavy with fear, shame, and desperation. When Zenil opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected them, and for a moment, she just stared at the mother-in-law who had made her life miserable and the husband who had done nothing. Ma Grace's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Sifo looked smaller than usual, his usual confidence gone. "Zenil," Ma Grace began, her voice trembling. She took a shaky step forward, then another. And then, in a move that shocked Zenil, she dropped to her knees on the porch. "Please. I am so sorry," she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I was jealous. I was cruel. I treated you like nothing, but I see now. I see everything. You carried this family." Zenil's chest tightened. Years of anger, humiliation, and pain rose up inside her, but she stayed silent, just listening. Sifo joined his mother, kneeling beside her. His hands shook. "Zenil, I was weak. I should have protected you. I should have told her off. I failed you," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I didn't see it. I didn't know. Please come back. Help us fix everything. We can't do it without you." Ma Grace sobbed openly, covering her face with her hand. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she whispered. "But I am begging, please, just give me a chance. I was wrong. Everything I said, everything I did, it was out of anger, jealousy, stupidity. I see it now. You were the one holding us together." Zenil felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Anger, hurt, pride, and relief. She remembered every harsh word, every insult, every moment she had endured silently. She thought of the sacrifices she had made, the sleepless nights, the money she had quietly sent for rent, the meals she had skipped, the jewelry she had sold. And yet, Seeing them on their knees, vulnerable and crying, she also felt the power she had earned, the clarity that she didn't need them anymore. She had carried them, protected them, and now she could choose what came next. Ma Grace and Sifo begged again, their voices desperate. Please, Zenil, come back. Help us. Be our family again. We can't do this without you. Zenil looked down at them, her heart steady. She had been invisible for too long, used and humiliated for too long. She had spent years carrying the weight of a family that had never appreciated her, and now the power was in her hands. She took a deep breath. She could forgive, but she would not return to the life that had tried to break her. She could teach them, guide them, but she would do it on her terms. And for the first time, she felt free. Zenil Dlamini woke up one morning in her small Soweto apartment with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. The panic, the fear, the constant stress of being invisible in a house that wasn't truly hers, they were gone. She sipped her coffee slowly, enjoying the quiet, knowing she had earned this peace. She was no longer desperate, no longer pleading, no longer defined by someone else's opinions or cruelty. Her phone buzzed with a notification from. She smiled as she read the message. She had been promoted, and her company was offering her relocation to Cape Town, a chance to start fresh in a new city with new opportunities. 2 years ago, she would have hesitated, worried about money, or what Ma Grace and Sifo might think. But now, she felt the weight of freedom settle on her shoulders, like a cloak made just for her. She had worked hard, sacrificed, and finally, it was her turn to reap the reward. Later that afternoon, Ma Grace and Sifo called her again, begging her to come back. They wanted her to return to Midrand, to fix everything, to rebuild the household she had been running silently all these years. Zenil listened, her calmness a stark contrast to the panic in their voices. She didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't plead. She simply looked at them, her eyes steady and strong. I didn't leave because you kicked me out, she said slowly, her voice clear and firm. I left because I finally chose myself. The words hung in the air. Ma Grace's mouth opened and closed, as if searching for a response. Sifo looked down, ashamed, realizing that the woman they had mocked and humiliated was now standing taller than ever, both emotionally and professionally. Zenil continued. She told them she would forgive. She might even guide them if they wanted to learn from their mistakes, but she would no longer sacrifice her life for people who didn't see her value. She had built her strength quietly, piece by piece, and no one could take that away from her. That evening, she packed her things for Cape Town, but this time it was different. She wasn't running from anyone. She wasn't hiding. She was moving forward, fully aware of her worth, confident in her abilities, and ready to embrace a life she had worked so hard to create. For the first time in years, Zenil smiled without guilt. She had carried a household silently, endured humiliation, and faced betrayal. But she had emerged stronger, smarter, and unapologetically herself. She knew one thing clearly. Her power didn't come from money, her job, or even her sacrifices. It came from choosing herself, standing up for herself, and refusing to let anyone define her. And as she looked at the city skyline from her window, she whispered to herself, almost in awe, I didn't leave because you kicked me out. I left because I finally chose me. This was Zenil's life now, strong, independent, and unstoppable. Zenil Dlamini stood on the balcony of her new apartment, the ocean stretching endlessly before. The salty breeze brushed her face, and for the first time in years, she felt completely free. The waves crashed against the shore, a rhythm that matched the steady beat of her own heart. She had earned this life with her own hard work, courage, and patience, and it felt sweeter than anything she had ever imagined. She had filed for divorce, letting go of a marriage that had never been equal, a life that had never respected her. Yet, surprisingly, she felt no anger, no bitterness. She carried peace in her heart, knowing she had chosen herself, and that was more powerful than any resentment. Zenil also found a new purpose. She started mentoring young women from rural areas, women like herself who had been told they weren't enough, who had been silenced or underestimated. She shared her story, her struggles, and her triumphs, showing them that they too could rise above abuse, humiliation, and doubt. Her past had become her strength, and her strength became a beacon for others. Every morning, she woke up with the knowledge that she was in control of her life. No one could belittle her, no one could take her dignity, and no one could erase the years of courage and sacrifices that had shaped her. She was living proof that strength and resilience always lead to freedom. And sometimes, when she thought back to Ma Grace and the house in Midrand, she smiled quietly. The irony wasn't lost on her. She kicked me out of a house I paid for, she whispered to herself, looking at the endless blue horizon. But she unknowingly pushed me into the life I deserved. For Zenil, the humiliation, the betrayal, and the pain had not broken her. They had set her free. And now she was unstoppable.